UX design process. A UX design process is a process that UX designers and the practitioners follow when they approach a UX project. So actually this consists of few steps. Number one can be understanding your users, which we call empathizing with your users. And then we have the research phase where we do research about these users and the competitors, and everything comes under this research phase. And then we have analyzing phase where we analyze all the raw data that we gathered through user research. And finally we have sketch, prototype and test. In the sketching phase, what we do is we create paper representation by using pencil and paper. On white paper we can draw low fidelity wireframes. And we have prototype where we create a visual design and UI mockups to present our end users and get their feedback. And finally we can send these to our users or the stakeholders and get their valuable feedback on this. All right, let's go through the whole process one by one. Number one, as I mentioned, is the understanding your users. If you don't understand the problem, if you don't understand your end users and the problems they are facing and the things that they are expecting, your product is not going to be a good product. And also, in addition to know your users, you have to know about the clients or the organization that you are working for and their objectives as well by doing this kind of a project. So those things are really valuable to know and get to know and empathize with your users by understand your problems and so on. Next we have research base. In the research base, what we do is we conduct user research. So we can do actual interviews, one-on-one physical interviews by inviting some of these users to your office, for instance, and carry out these interviews. So you have to prepare the interview questions based on the scenario, based on the product that you are going to do, and ask few questions from these users about their daily life. They can be actual users of some other applications, some other competitor applications. So you can gather all this valuable data by interviewing these people. So if you don't have any chance to do physical interviews, what you can do is you can do a Zoom meeting and maybe ask a questionnaire and get an idea about the requirements and the pain points and the expectations of your users. In that way you can learn about target audience of your product and try to solve the problems that they are facing in your product. So we talked about understanding and research, then comes the analyzing phase. So in this phase what we do is we analyzing the user insights that we gathered in first two steps. So we can analyze by creating visualizations such as creating personas, affinity mapping and empathy maps. So personas is also one thing that UX designers should do in the design process. By creating persona, he will be able to understand what his users background are, what his demographics, what are the pain points he facing, what are the motivations he have. So when we create user persona, we put a picture of this user. If you can't find actual picture of him, you can do a stock image, and maybe you should find a stock image that represent his personality, because that will give you a better empathy, better story to tell about this user. And put some demographic data, what is his name and age, his professional background and so on. And then we list down some pain points and some expectations of these users, as well as bit of personality about them. And in the affinity mapping also, we are mapping these user data and user inputs and create a diagram for different users. Empathy maps also really helpful in analyzing phase, where we empathize with our users and create the diagrams based on the input that they have given us. And then comes the sketching phase. In the sketching phase, what we do is we create paper representation for the solution. So in creation of the paper representation, what we can do is there are three things called low fidelity wireframes, mid fidelity wireframes and high fidelity wireframes. So you can start off with the low fidelity wireframe, where you sketch out your design research and analyzing inputs to actual wireframes, which represents the screens in your application. So if you gather requirements and everything is in place, you can start off by getting a pencil and paper and sketch out few screens of your design. So after you sketch these things, you have to send it to feedback, get the feedback. So even though I show this as a linear diagram, user UX design process is not a linear process. You have to go back and forth and do changes to fine tune your design or fine tune your product. So it is a iterative process, and you have to follow this process in order to get best out of your design or the research. All right. In the sketching process, after we do the low fidelity wireframes, we send them to our users to get feedback, or even the stakeholders or your team members. So feedback is another valuable thing you should get as a UX designer. So after you receive this feedback, you may have to go back and do your user research again, or maybe analyze your data and fine tune your wireframes based on this feedback given. So after this initial wireframes, which I call low fidelity wireframe, then you can move on to mid fidelity or high fidelity wireframes and uh, do the changes that they mention in your designs, the wireframe designs. So after you finalize your high fidelity wireframes, you can again send these wireframes to your users and gather their important feedback on them as well. Moving on, then we have the prototype step, where you design visually, where you have to visually design all the things that you did in the wireframe page. So in visual design, what we do is we decide on the color scheme that we are going to use based on color psychology principles, and the typography based on your end user requirements. And after understanding your users, you can decide on the typeface. And finally, when we do the prototyping, we can use applications such as Figma or even Adobe XD or Apple Sketch app to do these wireframes, UI mockups, and give the solution, present the solution to your users. So after all these visual designs, we create a prototype. A prototype is a click-through screens that you can give your users or the stakeholders of the company actual visual representation, the look and feel of your final application, by giving them these clickable diagrams or the screens of your design. So you can create these using Figma by connecting different screens in the process, and also you can add some animations, micro interactions, and so on. So actual look and feel of your final product will be there, but there will be no back end connected to your design. So after, again, you have to send this prototype to gather feedback from your valuable users and also the stakeholders, or maybe from the client or the team members of your team. So after all this done, if the product is good, they will give you some feedback. So based on this feedback, you may have to again fine tune your design and create a final product. So then we are going to do a user testing. So as I mentioned, in the prototype stage, we send it to our users and do the user testing, where we can iterate and refine our design based on these inputs that users are giving. And finally, we are giving this product to our coders or the front-end developers and back-end developers, where they can create the actual product and launch it to the market. So even after you launch it to the market, you have to make sure you continuously gather feedback from your users and understand if there's any user flows. We can do some methods like screen recordings. There are applications such as Clarity and Hotjar, where you can record user interactions in your screens, and if there's any roadblocks or any flaws in your design, you will get to know from these recordings, and also you can do actual user interviews by giving them the actual product, and you can refer to your Apple App Store or Google Play Store reviews if you want to know more about your application. So that is the normal UX design process. There are other practicals as well, like double diamond method and so on. So we will discuss about those in later video. So have a nice day then. We'll see you again soon.